So today I wanted to do a short talk about intuitive chart reading. Intuitive chart reading is using your eyes at a first glance to identify energy signatures in the chart that as of yet haven't been integrated into the logical or scientific understanding of current astrology. So what I mean by that is we'll be looking at the shapes that aspects make within the chart, the symbols, so to speak. You'll be familiar with the concept if you've ever heard of things such as yods, grand crosses, grand trines, things of that nature. Basically, when several planets interact with each other and the aspects are drawn in the chart, the aspects will make symbols. So we'll use Friedrich Nietzsche's chart as an example. So right here you'll be saying, well, there is no sort of chart pattern here, at least not based on current astrology. But what you'll notice intuitively is that the chart is one-dimensional, or it's polarizing. You'll see that all of the activity cuts off, generally speaking, between Mars and Uranus and Jupiter. Mars sits in the 10th house in Virgo, and Jupiter sits in Pisces in the 3rd house, and Uranus in the 4th house in Aries. And that, intuitively speaking, it kind of looks like a barrier. You can see the red aspect lines, the oppositions. Of course, Pluto is an outlier and Venus is an outlier, but they don't make as strong of an impression as the oppositions do between Mars and Jupiter and Uranus. So when you look to the left side of the chart, which shortly we'll talk about in terms of quadrants, you'll see that all of the activity is piled up, or all of the activity is towards the left side of the chart. So roughly speaking, those are the 4th quadrant and the 1st quadrant. And if we were to interpret that seasonally, we would say the 4th quadrant represents winter energy and the 1st quadrant represents spring energy. Now this gets a little more complex because when we look at the sign energy, we see that the 4th quadrant is actually influenced roughly by the autumn energy. So you have winter and autumn energy in the 4th quadrant. In the 1st quadrant, you have the transition into winter energy by sign and spring energy by quadrant. So think about winter and autumn, and winter and spring. So because all the aspect activity is compartmentalized to this area, you'll say that this is somebody who's, well, roughly speaking, you'll say that they're heavily geared towards spring, winter, and autumn energy. So you might be thinking, well, okay, his his most, quote unquote, his most powerful time of year would be those seasons, autumn and winter and spring, because that's where all the activity is. Now we'll put that aside for a moment and notice that we aren't talking about the planets themselves as personalities, so to speak. We're not characterizing the planets and their energy specifically. But we'll put that aside for now, and we'll try to interpret the appearance that the aspects in the chart as a whole create. So you can't say that this is a yod. You can't say that it's a grand trine. You can't say that it's a grand cross or any of that. You can say that it looks a little hectic, aside from being looking highly polarized. So what I call this is a chicken scratch uh, uh, pattern, or something like that. Now, chicken scratch, you can think of the rooster, and you can think of the color red, and you can think of Mars energy. So when I say chicken scratch, you're thinking of Mars traditionally, and you're thinking of Scorpio and Aries. Or in the modern system, you're also thinking of Pluto. So chicken scratch, you can also think about desk drawings. You can think about, things that are really, well, you can just think of chicken scratch. You can think of marks that don't go away. You can think of the indentations that things leave on objects. You could think of the way that cattle brands work. You have to think of messy, scratchy things that get embedded. And when you have embeddings like that, you have, malignant attachments, so to speak. So you can also think about ghosts, hauntings. And when you know about the character of Nietzsche and the history of him, you can definitely intuit that he had ghosts of his own. Of course, not least of all because he went mad in his later years from being unable to reconcile his philosophy. So this is the type of personality that we're seeing with this chart pattern, which I call chicken scratch. You're seeing a feverish kind of personality. You're seeing a personality which has a high consciousness or sensitivity towards malignant attachments. And of course, if you do want to dive into the specific planet personalities, one good place to look would be Mars in Virgo, because Virgo and Capricorn are both, in a sense, perfectionist energies. Now, if you want to go the traditional route, you can also include that Mars is out of place being in the diurnal section of the chart, which is the upper portion, because it's a nocturnal planet. It should be better off in the bottom half of the chart, which is nocturnal. So these are just little ways that you can augment the interpretation. Needless to say, you can also see that his ascendant is in Scorpio in the 29th degree, which is an important degree. So his chart ruler is out of place. It's in a sign and a house of perfectionism. The Pluto is in Aries, but I'm not too concerned with that. And anyway, all of the activity is compartmentalized or polarized into one half of the chart. So like I said earlier, you might be going, well, okay, his power might come in those times of year, autumn, winter. But we have to consider that somebody who's highly polarized is somebody who wants space from themselves. Somebody who has a chicken scratch disposition wants space to themselves. So, needless to say, the heart of my topic here would be to consider that his power would come actually from late spring with Taurus, Gemini, or mid-spring to late spring, and into summer. So you have four signs really that would be where the space fills in for his chart, so to speak. The space fills in for his personality or his soul. Because one way that you have to look at charts is you're looking at the astral body. Remember, astra means star. So you're looking at the star body, which means you're looking at the soul. So there's an old quote that says, the soul isn't in the body is in the soul. So when we're looking at our charts, we're looking at really the outside manifestation or the externalization of our souls, which comes through experiences, through others, through the world around us. So you'd have to say that growing up, the world around Nietzsche would be, for lack of a better word, chicken scratch. It would be a very winter and autumn energy. Now, winter and autumn are two very severe seasons because all of a sudden, things pass away, things get congealed, things get stuck and frozen. So you might be looking at all those blue aspects and say, well, okay, he must have good energy. And that's not to take away from him that he does, but it's to say that that concentration of energy falls in a relatively malignant time of the year. So it's not like his personality will just, be easygoing just because you see the blue, soft aspects. In reality, the power in this type of chart, which is a polarity chart, would come from transits filling in the spaces in his chart, which would be the second and third quadrants: Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and Leo. So you might be saying, well, okay, this is all theoretical. How can you prove it? And I can prove it very simply. But just keep in mind, again, that we're looking at a polarity chart. Think of it as we're looking at a personality that's divided in two, or that's really third path oriented. So the third path consciousness comes through several signs. It comes through Gemini, it comes through Aquarius, and several others. As opposed to a sign like Aries, which represents splitting. It represents trying to become one and splitting away from the other. On the other hand, you have Libra, which might be the at least one of the primary signs of this type of balance consciousness. So you'll see that he has his sun in Libra, which is in a good position. I don't remember if it's detriment or fall, but it's one of the signs where the sun has the most complications. So keep in mind that this is a sign of balance, and this sign is either under an affliction because of the sun's position in it, or it's causing the affliction to the sun, to the solar energy. And tie that back, tie Libra's meaning as a symbol of balance to the fact that his chart is unbalanced. It's heavily polarized towards the left side of the chart. The right side of the chart is completely spacious and empty. So these are ways that you can like I said earlier, augment the interpretation here. So anyway, let's go back to proving that summer and late spring are the best times for this personality. Remember, the space wants to be filled in so that there can be balance. This is a chart. This is a soul that wants balance because the sun is in Libra. It struggles for it. So we're looking to fill in the space. All right, so here we have it. Keep in mind that the right side of his chart was predominantly summer, where all the space was. And we'll see it right here that Friedrich Nietzsche loved summer best because the climate helped his health. He spent his favorite summers in the Swiss Alps, and he wrote his famous books in the summers. And so on and so forth. You just have it right here. It's not really much that I have to spell out for you. But you can see that the reality is that he was a summer soul. Now, I'll take you to another thing. So looking at the bottom paragraph first, we'll come back to that what I mentioned about his first quadrant being, or his fourth and first quadrants being heavily dominated by winter energy and autumn energy. But we'll see that in winter, he avoided cold northern climates entirely to escape migraines and illness. So he wasn't a winter personality, despite having so many aspects and planets that lined up to winter. Well, he did like autumn and spring before the severe weather set in, so he wasn't anti-autumn and spring. And this overview states that he had an affinity for autumn because, he wrote about it and he expressed that it was a time of year where thoughtfulness, set in. But this is a bit of a misinterpretation because when he wrote that, he wasn't particularly saying that he was fond of autumn. He was just expressing that, the nature of the time of year. So anyway, food for thought all in all. This stuff's kind of hard for me to get out because, like the title suggests, it's an intuitive grasp. Nobody's really gone this far since probably the 1500s or 1600s as far as developing new or discovering and laying out new chart patterns. I would like to see this field open up because obviously if you take into consideration what I've been laying out, minus the wordiness and minus the stumbling, you'll see that, it's factual. The chart pattern that I'm laying out here speaks to the sun sign energy in this chart. Even the polarizing nature speaks to other elements in his chart. So, without even going into, the moon is Saturn is trining the Mars, or, the moon is trining the Uranus, without even going into specifics about his personality, we're able to see the general disposition, the for lack of a better word, the general malefic disposition and even the real source of power in his chart, the heart of his chart, which would be, the summer quadrant, or the summer signs. So, food for thought if anybody's really interested.